This is the Business Chat Podcast.
Welcome to the Business Chat. I'm still your host, Drew Moore, and really excited to kick off this series of Innovators. And I'm pleased to have my new friend, Dr. Doug Mackaman of Sabatigo on the show today. Sabatigo is really cool, you guys. This is something that I don't think hear as much being talked about. It's a different approach to helping companies stop churn, promote wellness. Sabatigo provides these curated leadership journeys. These are not merely vacations. These aren't just time off, and Doug's going to tell us about it today. Welcome to the show today, Doug. How you doing?
Drew, I'm doing great, and I'm always happy to sing the Sabatigo song to a new audience. So thanks again for teeing this one up for us, man.
Right on, man. You bet. Well, did I say that right coming in, that you guys provide curated leadership journeys and stop churn, promote growth? Tell us a little bit, expound on that a little bit.
Well, even before COVID reached a point where it took over our lives, all of us in the business space around wellness were hearing similar things. And what we were hearing was that people's sense of engagement with what they were doing professionally, with how they were managing balance between home and work and so on, was driving folks toward a kind of burnout crisis, individually and across business sectors. So Sabatigo comes out for me of about 20 plus years of research and work in the space of rest, leisure, and really sort of aggressively looking at wellness questions from an academic and a practical standpoint. So we're about taking people who need that extra clarity, that extra push toward creativity and innovation, and just that girding and architecture around intentionality and mindfulness, and leading them further along on those journeys than they could get on their own. That's Sabatigo in a nutshell, Drew.
I mean, that's tremendous. And I wanted, the listeners and the folks watching this episode to hear that clearly and not take my my bumper as the only explanation. And, we'll get into it a little bit more as we dive into our questions, our conversation early today. Before we do, as I mentioned to you, before we kicked off this particular conversation we're having, is that we like to bring a local beverage to the show. It's just kind of it's not totally random, but it's seemingly a random off-topic moment where we stop and just pay a little homage, give a little salute to a local craft brew, little roaster, whatever's in your neighborhood that you frequent. So as I ask all my guests, Doug, what are you drinking today?
Well, great question, and typically I'd have many different answers, but today I'm drinking Dunn Brothers Roasted Coffee from Grand Avenue in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm right around the corner from my beloved local literary coffee shop, Nina's Coffee Shop, so I'd love to get a joint shout-out both to Dunn Brothers' original flagship shop and to June Berkowitz's amazing Nina's Coffee Shop. Thank you, Drew.
Yeah, you bet. Nina's is definitely going to get that shout out. Nina's Coffee Shop. Man, that's great. I love when you do find, and it's kind of a college, you said, it's a regular fixture, right? To see students and thinkers and folks hanging out. It's that place. That's awesome, man. That's great. Well, I'm also here with a beverage. I jokingly told Doug before we started the show that when guests show up with coffee and I show up with beer, it's increasingly making me look to be some sort of alcoholic, or like I've got some endorsement from the Craft Brewers Guild, but that's not always the case. I have relocated, and that's another conversation. Really enjoying the great state of Michigan out here, and I bring with me today Havoc IPA. It is it's a nice classic can that you see around here. North Peak Brewing Company's out of Dexter, Traverse City, and I've yet to visit either one, but I've enjoyed their beers, and they are a regular, again, fixture in Michigan. So let's go ahead and give the virtual cheers, Doug, to kick off the show.
Cheers, man.
Here we are.
Yeah,
man, to you. Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, this is really cool because to kick off a series with innovation, I think folks would expect technology, right? Right off the bat, you hear innovation, you're thinking the gadget and that kind of thing. And as Benjamin and I, my producer, were looking through the various folks I'm meeting on LinkedIn, it wasn't on the surface. I was thinking higher ed, I was thinking HR, work culture, and I paused and went, if there's anything that you are doing that's clear, it's innovation, in my opinion. So Thanks for letting us squeeze you into that series in a sense, because while there's many aspects to what you're doing, it's an innovative approach, in my opinion, and I think we both agree to this idea of having wellness. I like before that you said that you're creating both empathy and leaders. And again, I want to get into all this. I've got some questions for you, but it really is an innovative approach from the employer standpoint, from startup standpoint of going, interesting. Most of what we see is a technology play on productivity, right? How do we keep and retain folks? And we're trained to think tools, and that's not necessarily all bad, but I like that you've got this whole other conversation. So on that note, that's my first question, and we've already kind of got into this before the show. How can Sabatigo, respond to this resignation culture of now, right? And that's what we see is what can it do, and what do you see Sabatigo doing to respond to that?
I think it's a great question. So many of us today are so full of opportunities. We can change careers. We can certainly change jobs. We can change where we live. We can move from LA to Michigan like you just did, Drew. And these things would have seemed almost impossible 3 or 5 years ago based on, the communities we worked in. And while all of that change is fantastic, the Sabatigo piece, the thing that we are about, is asking all of our traveler Sabatigo or clients, instead of always looking laterally and looking around them for new opportunities, we ask everyone to consider the metaphorical journey of Sabatigo that's actually a journey into ourselves, so that each of our Sabatigoers is given brand new and powerful tools that are about creativity, that are about compassion surge, that are about innovation, and that are about making sure that wellness is not just some adjunctive extra thing you throw on the top of your day's trip, but is actually like part and parcel of who you are and what you do. The thing, to boil this down, Drew, people look for the next new thing as a way of trying to solve problems that are actually huge problems inside of ourselves that are huge opportunities. How can we look in a more honest and searching way at who we are, what we can contribute, what our own leadership is meant to become over the next 6 months or 6 years, rather than what's the hot new job with a brand new startup that's knocking on your door via a headhunter or a buddy, so you can quickly jump from one thing to another. That's where Sabatigo is a special solution. We're not about giving people the easy, fast wings to fly to the next new gig. Instead, we're about helping people explore what a lifetime of learning and being engaged and feeling compassion and empathy and channeling wellness can feel like. Because when you feel great about yourself, you're not concerned about whether the day's meeting that, your crabby boss just dragged you to at an early morning Zoom felt pathetic to you. You're focused instead about how can you push through with toughness and grit the crabby meetings and get to the things that you can really contribute, that drive home what your value add is as an employer and as a leader. That's what we're about, Drew.
Yeah, and it's riddled with innovation because as I said before, what I see, I know what you see, and we need to talk a little bit about, the story, right? A lot of folks are thinking, well, hold on, how did this guy get into how did Sabatigo start? But a lot of what I see, has more to do again, and it may be in one sense kind of nipping at the weeds, right? Not getting the root of the problem, but we've come up with solutions for this before, right? We've given extended vacation. We've talked about, employer setting programs, good ones too, by the way. I don't say this with any demeaning tone, where we go, hey, here, take 2 full days and put 16 hours to a nonprofit for your choice, but it doesn't really address the root, does it, Doug? I mean, it's not really about culture. It's just throwing more perks in an onboarding package versus, like you said, taking a step back and really looking at what the values are of an organization.
I think that's so true, Drew, because, the onboarding piece, we began with giant jars of M&Ms and ping pong tables and foosball tables. And, now we're up to all kinds of things that are considered necessary. And as much as the HR piece is absolutely critical, we're never going to really slow and certainly not stop top talent churn just by giving more carrots. What we have to do instead is the tough piece, where we look at employees and we say, this is going to be a really rough, rocky journey that's not going to be full of just high five moments. That's not going to be full of just like giant celebratory bear hugs about a deal that no one thought we could get inked and we just inked. Those are like the lanyard of the work journey and of the professional journey.
Yeah.
The actual stuff of that journey is tough. And it's about bouncing through, sometimes like a ping pong ball and sometimes like, a billiard ball. It's like bouncing through what's tough and feeling like more self-efficacy and more authorship over solutions because they take creativity and they take being dogged and innovative. So what Sabatigo wants to do is tell people that work is tough and being an innovator is tough, but it doesn't have to be old-fashioned tough, Drew, where I'm going to outwork anybody. No one's going to be at a desk or a Zoom call earlier than me, man. No one's going to give up more family time.
Bootstrap stuff, right?
People don't want that. Instead, they want to know that they can contribute, but they can do it in a way that's tactical, that's smart, that's going to make them feel like winners, and it's going to lift up their business. And for us, the critical thing, Drew, is not popping in with a Sabatigo solution that's solely based on Zooms or based on team trips to a ropes course or a golf course or any other kind of course. Sabatigo is a curated learning journey where we literally take our clients, our Sabatigoers, and we move to a foreign place. Like our first cities for Sabatigo this November are Paris and Berlin. And our team of Sabatigoers will join incredible disruptors who I will lead. And we will work together in the streets, the museums, the wine bars and bistros, the great public spaces and coffee shops to really drill in to what the sources of sustainable innovation are, to what the sources of like an honest integration with wellness can feel like for us. So that's what I think is so cool.
Yeah, and you hit the next question I had was to drill down on, put some skin on what one of these Sabatigo journeys, these bespoke retreats look like as folks, again, that won't maybe take the time after this show to really get into the site or have time with the consult with you. Give me the 60-second version. Company comes and says, hey, from our C-suite to our project managers to our creative lead, we just have turnover, we have churn. What would you recommend? And what does that kind of process look like? And I know there's a lot, right? You might need the whole show to kind of break down what you do, but from a high level, is it consult? You go right to planning a trip? Is it we really need to get on a Zoom and understand pain points? What do you do when you go in and do surgery and start to put a prescription together for a group?
That's fantastic, Drew. My main thing is to work with our clients, whether they're individual travelers who want to hit the Sabatigo platform on their own and reboot their commitment to a new career choice, or whether we're working with a whole corporate entity. My piece is to do an audit on what is not working. I'll ask all of the clients and all of the potential travelers I talk to, if you could look back from a standpoint of 18 months from now and say, Sabatigo changed my life and gave me these things, what would we have done for you? And I learned a ton from what people tell me. And here's the one thing that is the overarching piece Sabatigo is about. We want to make people dream again. We want to make people feel this excitement that, Drew, for 25 years, I've led global study abroad programs for universities all around the United States. And we've taken literally 10,000 plus university undergraduates to the most life-changing experiential learning moments of their lives. And so I know from decades of dealing with people who are, 18 to 24, 25 typically, what it looks like when people are dreaming again and what it looks like when they're feeling that the world is theirs to really own. And I think what happens when we leave college, even from great universities, even from great master's programs or Ph.D. programs, we leave with a full tank of gas, a lot of great ideas, tons of super mentorship, and then we hit the hard work of work and innovating and gutting out tough patches in professional and social and human life. And as much as I am, I've been mentoring and teaching Gen Z and millennials since the beginning of their generations, and I've seen them. There's nobody out there with more creativity, more push than these demographic folks who are now our leaders in business. And yet, if there's a knock on them that really has gained traction, it's about resiliency. It's about being able to stick out what's tough and not just take that call from a headhunter. And I think Sabatigo is a miracle for that, Drew. When I'm working with some of my thought leaders on Sabatigo and my Sabatigoers, and we're walking through the streets of Paris, my friend, and we get to the amazing and moving place in Paris right by the Seine River that's called the Wall of the Just. And we talk about leadership, and we talk about what it took to get your name carved on that wall, and the sacrifice, and how you had to swallow your own personal fear to do what it took to get recognized by Yad Vashem in Jerusalem and get your name carved on that wall. There is typically not a dry eye in the house, not because my clients aren't super experienced, not because they aren't tough business leaders, and not because they haven't read about the Holocaust. There isn't a dry eye in the house on Sabatigo in that moment, Drew, because we're standing there. We're standing in a place where history and culture and politics and art have actually happened. And we're talking about what leadership looks like literally, as you see those names carved on the Wall of the Just. Are you vibing with what I'm saying, man?
Yeah, and I'm going, so basically, anybody listening will be caught that Doug's not walking these guys around, and you've explained this to me, Doug, but I'm loving the layer we're getting to today. This isn't just, it sounds like you do a little bit of this, it's not just drinking some of the best wine, sampling baklava, and getting great views. That may be a an accessory to the vacation, the Sabatigoer's journey piece, but it starts before the actual trip itself abroad, if that's what happens, and it continues beyond. And you're there seeing these actual, landmarks that are part of what you're looking to instill in these folks, and it creates a full 3D, 4D experience of touch, smell, taste, talk, walk, and everything. And that's key. And I think that part I'm getting right now with you more than we have up to this point of understanding kind of how you work. That's really interesting.
I'm preparing a Sabatigo. We call them our Wonder Walks, and I'm preparing a Sabatigo Wonder Walk for this November that'll be led by me, together with Dr. Natalie Nixon, who's a absolute lights out genius executive business coach. She does incredible training. She has a Ph.D. in design thinking, and Natalie is like second to nobody. But what Natalie and I are going to develop in Paris will be a amazing Josephine Baker and race walk through the city of Paris. And I'm telling you, Drew, you can go online and look at slides of the new Branly Museum. You can look at the outside of the hotel where James Baldwin stayed in 1948. You can do those things. But when our group talks about who young Josephine Baker was in the jazz age of Paris, and we look at who she became as her spark just like exploded in the jazz age and after, and then who she emerged as during World War II, when she joined the French Resistance. To her dying day, Baker wore her French Legion of Honor as the most proud thing she'd ever accomplished and earned in her career as a fighter in the French Resistance. And we finished that day with Natalie and me together and our Sabatigoers, and we walk into the crypt of the Pantheon in Paris's Latin Quarter, and we see the latest and last person to be installed in the Pantheon by the French president. And who is it, my friend? It's Madame Josephine Baker. That's like a Sabatigo wonder walk. And our people leave, and then we unpack that.
That's cool.
Sitting around an incredibly lavish and fantastic market lunch with wine and whatever we need.
There it is.
And we talk again about leadership.
Yeah. Man, there's so many things I want to say, and I'm going to try to, muzzle most of them. So after you're painting this picture, I'm thinking of the manager director at an organization the size of Facebook, Meta, Google, and I'm thinking of somebody that's starting out. Maybe they've just broken away and they are a business coach and they're making that kind of nerve-wracking journey out to be a consultant. But if I heard you correctly, this works. Sabatigo can be tuned for either the individual or for companies, for larger structures.
Absolutely. I mean, for sure, we can take like small teams from specific corporations, whether those would be something massive like Meta, Facebook, or, in the consulting space, that's great. But we also have huge need from individuals who've had great runs of, 6 to 10 terrific career years. They've made big decisions. They've made mistakes. They've made hugely good decisions that have yielded, and they've made money. And now they need to figure out what's next. And again, I return to my life as a university professor, Drew. We're all only really good at a couple of things. And I'm certainly not really good at everything in university life, or I would have stayed a tenured full professor. Instead, I've got this need to be entrepreneurial, and I've got this need to be like an idea farmer. And ultimately, Sabatigo is going to be this really funky and amazing in-country idea farm where our thought leaders from Deloitte mix together with folks from Meta who tag along with people who are like battling it out in a 24/7 kind of frenzied startup mode, along with, my thought leader disruptors who are all at this level of accomplishment in business that's almost ethereal. It's so elevated. And that's where I think, like Sabatigo, you can say a lot of things about what we are and what we want to be. In the end, we're going to be kind of a gadfly. We're going to be a hothouse plant. We're going to be disruptive, but we're going to be disruptive in this way that's about taking people and saying, what do you dream of? What do you think you are worth? Who do you want to become? And how can the contributions you are born to make become the actual stuff that is monetizable and driving business and driving growth for your company and for you?
Sure. Yeah, and it sounds like the ideal individual or group, like you said, it's not about the fact that they're necessarily in a rut. It's not that 10 headhunters are calling you and you feel stuck. It could be. You could also be someone that's had tremendous success, and in that ripe early 50s, you're looking back on, I built all this stuff, but I didn't really forecast where to go. And frankly, I don't feel ready to retire. I'm being sent these brochures in the mail of these retirement homes and golf and timeshares, and I don't feel like any of that. And I feel like I want to start again and got ideas, but I'm just overwhelmed, or I'm wrung out, right, from my last experience. That's a bigger group of folks, the silent majority going, that's me. And I don't know how to pivot. I don't know what that looks like. For me, the headhunter call is not, may not be person, but for this individual, and I talk to these guys all the time, it's not that it isn't attractive. It's that it becomes this kind of white noise of going, I don't know what I should do going forward. I need a point of inspiration, and I need to get out of my usual environment. And I think Sabatigo, with the innovation piece I'm hearing, is you can be so many different stages, that this idea that you're coming and seeing what it looks like to be a leader and to have passion and drive growth. And like you said, not just for the guy, again, in his mid-20s, showing them how to stick with it, helping his employer to break the churn culture, but through some real surgery into the deep issues, all the way to this. And I'm painting the picture again in the mid-50s. If you're listening and you're my age and you just hit the ripe age of 40, you're well into your 60s. The point is that you've achieved success, but now you're kind of stuck. Sounds like Doug and you may need to talk. And Doug, you've got such, again, as you say on the site, so well, a bespoke, unique approach. I agree. This isn't some scalable, put in a box thing, and it's going to be disruptive, right? You're going to come to each individual organization and have a unique prescription. Great. I love it. Why don't, this is about me gabbing about it. What I wanted to ask you, as we're starting to kind of wrap up, before we move to one of the more landmark questions I've got, is tell us your story a little bit. Throw a few minutes in. Was Sabatigo something that came from your personal feeling of plateauing, from churn you saw as an organizational leader in higher ed? Tell us about that a little bit.
Interesting question. I appreciate it a ton. I love academia. I love being a professor, and I always have. I got my Ph.D. and my master's at Cal Berkeley. And then I went to the Deep South to Southern Miss in Hattiesburg and taught there, got tenure in history and global studies and innovation, and, was a full professor. Loved it. But Drew, my original research, the subject of my first book is called Leisure Settings. And the book is all about like the early history of business burnout in the 19th century and what doctors made of this first group, almost primarily of men who came to them saying like, I can't sleep. My hands are jittery. I'm sweaty at night. I'm drinking too much. I'm super short and abrupt with my partner, my coworkers. I basically am riding through life like we would say a total a-hole today. So I looked at these case studies of who these business professionals were in the 19th century and what doctors told them to do. And that became like my book. My book was all about the early days of the vacation in modern Europe and the mandated vacation to end burnout and to make people become productive again. So my research years and years ago focused on the 19th century and the rise of spas and bathing places and going to beaches and all of those great things we all love to do today. And as I went on in my academic career teaching tens of thousands of students, I always had that tuning fork that just rang for me that was about like, what happens when people burn out and how do we solve those problems today? And the stark truth right now, Drew, is we are hardly beyond where my doctors were in the 1880s prescribing spa vacations. I mean, that's essentially what we do in HR and even in a physician's office when we tell our high-test, super, potent business leaders, you need a yoga retreat. You need to cleanse from your phone. You need to go on a juice cleanse. You need to be in this prescribed environment. And that's what got me thinking about the Sabatigo. I want our organization and our process to get people before they reach that kind of pathological, like medicinal point, before they become pathological in being burned out or being so high key and so achievement driven that they lose touch with themselves. I want to make them dream. And I want to make them, as we say in Sabatigo, I want to make them walk the walk, where they're actually feeling the cobblestones, smelling the croissants, looking at the dew in the gardens as they're sitting with Ruchika Sikri, the amazing Ruchika, who is a Sabatigo disruptor for wellness and is our yoga instructor. They're with people like her, feeling this way of being alive. That's where Sabatigo comes from. My whole background of being a professor and leading student groups abroad and watching that change while also thinking about research I've been doing for more than 20 years on wellness, on burnout, and how to attack those things, how to attack them via a really carefully programmed journey, just like what my French doctors used to build for their clients in the 1880s.
Yeah, and that, man, thank you for all that information, because that really is kind of the final layer on this picture of who you are, your passion, what Sabatigo is and does, is understanding that you're marrying your years of research, your actual experience and observation, kind of colleagues around you and folks in the space. And anyone listening is kind of nodding right now. They can resonate either themselves with their boss or the work culture they're in. And let me be the first to say, at least on this recording, we have never had more of the pathological and prescriptive boxes that you could shop from, right? You mentioned cleanses, and I was mentioning before, given to nonprofits, all good things in and of themselves, but they feel as though they're kind of nipping at the top of the weed. They're not dealing with the root of culture and mindset. And this is really expansive definition of mindfulness, of wellness, of whole wellness in that culture. So this is the innovation, y'all, that I brought Doug on to preach about, because I truly believe what he's doing is a new approach to an old problem, using things around us and taking a step back from driving productivity with the old mechanisms, stopping churn by merely putting, like what he said earlier, some M&Ms on the counter and, beanbag seating chairs and bring your dog to work. Again, all neat things that we've evolved to the point where workplaces look like that. But it doesn't change the root of where the individual or the group, it has some bad habits, honestly. Is that a bad way to say it, Doug? There's just bad habits in culture and in individual work life. I mean, that's the simplest way I'd put it. Sabatigo helps bad habits.
I think there are bad habits, Drew. And the sad thing for me, to take my academic and business leader hat off and just speak as a human, the sad thing for me is that almost none of us who manage people, almost none of us who do that for a living, have any desire ultimately other than to see as fully human the people who report to us. We want to empathize with them. We want to have a sense of who they are. We want to experience them in a holistic way, but we're programmed because of all kinds of leadership stuff, including, by the way, a ton of books on leadership and a ton of books on, how to motivate people, which are important works in many respects, of course. But what I tell people to read as we get ready to Sabatigo together, I have people read novellas and short stories. I ask people to read poetry. I ask people to build a playlist of the songs that move them the most, so that when we reach some of our sharing moments on Sabatigo and people talk about what motivates them and how they've been self-defeating and making bad decisions and following bad habits, they're actually connecting in the number one way that every manager of people wants to connect with their own teams in accordance with. And that's at a human level, man. That's at a human level. We've unlearned how to do that. So now we have a whole bunch of books on how to do that. The real thing we just need to do is experience doing it. And Sabatigoers, just like my study abroad students for decades, will bond with each other, will care about each other, and will carry water for each other. And that is vitally important in our world today.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if an amen is appropriate, but that's kind of that's my instinctive response to that, the last bit. That's tremendous. And as I'm thinking about who I encounter most, it's maybe not every group you do, Doug, every individual. We encounter different folks in my day-to-day job and who you are around. I am around a lot of startups, right? Talking to individuals starting up their next venture, folks and moving into that second year. Everyone's sleeping under desks and it's very intense, and they're moving in from Series B to Series C, and it is just it's a panic attack for a lot of these guys, but it's also exciting for startups hearing you today. It understandably, from what they've been sold in the past and what they've seen the previous generation do, they hear Sabatigo, play on sabbatical, and this idea of vacation, and there's a generational kind of eye roll, right? You know what I mean, Doug? Kind of yeah, sure, let's just solve it with a vacation. They're not entirely sold on what you're saying because of what they've seen from the past experience. So in your own words, I guess, speak to startup needs a bit, and wouldn't ask you to sell any one particular group on our interview, but I just know that's the future of business. Where it's just being flooded with new companies, and 1 out of 10 is surviving today, but there's so many in it. And if you could speak to the needs of these startup companies forming that culture early on, and the founders themselves beginning to form, as I mentioned, habits and just preconceived ideas of how things could go, I'd love for you to address the startup community directly.
I'd love to. I'm super excited about startups and always have been during the time of working on Sabatigo. Here's the thing, man. If you think about it, Van Gogh was a pretty good still life painter, and his landscapes were dark and moody and kind of crabby, but they were solid. Picasso was a great portrait artist. He was really talented. I mean, he went to top art schools and was really good. Hemingway wrote a ton of great newspaper copy all over the United States. What made these people great? What made these people go from being workmanlike and good, Series A, to stratospheric, was getting the hell away from all of their routines and getting on the road and going, as we say in Sabatigo all the time, elsewhere. So Hemingway discovers his genius thanks to the First World War and driving an ambulance on the Italian front, and then he stays in Paris. Van Gogh gets his genius by seeing what the light looked like in France and especially southern France. It changed everything for him. And Picasso lit out also for France, leaving behind Barcelona and all of his comforts, all of the friends who thought he was great. And when he comes back to Spain in the many ways that he did, he comes back as this like titanically huge figure. So to the startups, I get it. Everyone's bailing the boat. You're held together financially and otherwise by duct tape and baling wire. You've got money that's the goal, and you've got some money in the store. You don't even have an HR department yet, and maybe you don't even want one. That's all good. What's not good, though, is sitting around a table or a bunch of Zooms with people who breathe like you do, who eat the same foods you do, who drink the same Kool-Aid that you have been pouring. What you need to do, and what every company has to do in order to go from being clever and good and exciting and dynamic to like monstrous and incredible and just phenomenal, they've got to get out of the mindset that launched them in the first place on many levels. And that's where Sabatigo and startups are a marriage made in heaven, because we take you folks away before your habits are dug in so deeply that pivoting is impossible, and we give you what it feels like to live every day, your team and you, with a dreamscape right there as your horizon line. That's what innovation is about. That's what creativity is about. And that's where business growth goes from arithmetic to exponential.
And if you're hearing Doug shaking your head going, no, man, it's too late for me. We're already there. The habits have, sunk in, and, we're paying back venture capital, and we're finding how to crawl out of this and pivot. I would argue that this man has the grit and the time to hear, where your systemic and where your cultural problems are and churn is, and give Doug an opportunity to understand your organizational or individual needs. The time I've spent with you, Doug's been awesome on the show. That's part of the problem with having a podcast, is you kind of peel the layers back and realize how deep topics go and passions exist. And with you, I can already see having you back and talking maybe about these journeys. Maybe we go into some slides and some imagery and paint the picture for folks a bit more next time. In closing, before I kind of bookend and sign off with you, tell me what's coming up for Sabatigo. This is a time where I'm asking you, please make a shameless plug. Tell us about the next event. Tell us about what folks can be doing to follow what you're doing. If they have any interest, if they're on LinkedIn, they're visiting your site, what can they do to stay in touch with Sabatigo and kind of watch from a distance as they're deciding if this is something they should do?
Thanks, Drew. I really appreciate that. Well, I'm on LinkedIn, obviously, Dr. Doug Mackaman. So connecting with me there is a no-brainer and is easy. And I love to schedule a 30-minute calendar time slot to talk to folks who have questions, either as individuals or from the HR or startup space. And our website is fairly comprehensive in some of what we discuss about our leadership journey and how we create bespoke Sabatigo experiences. And that's at www.sabatigo.com. Otherwise, I think the main thing that we're building toward and are excited about is a Sabatigo journey right before Thanksgiving. So you put away the Halloween costumes. If you've got kids, the sugar's all gone out of their bodies. Before the holidays kick in, we want a Sabatigo journey for about 15 leaders who really want to experience the magic of Paris and Berlin in November, when the summer crowds are gone. The autumn leaves are still gorgeous, and you, as Sabatigoers, will come with us starting on about the 12th of November for a little over 10 days. And together with my disruptor team, we will work city by city, cobblestone by cobblestone, to help you get your dreamscape tuned up. So when you come back and you sit down at the Thanksgiving table with your family, with friends, and you gear up toward the holiday season, the end of your fiscal year, whatever, you've got this new secret fuel in your tank that you got because you engage with Sabatigo. So I welcome folks to set up a Zoom with me to talk about how we can make this happen for you or your team. And I encourage everybody to look at our site and to connect with me on LinkedIn, because I'm pleased to offer, consults and advice and commentary with obviously no obligation whatsoever. I'm a professor first and foremost, and if you or your team need just a quick tune-up or talk, I'm all there to help out. And I appreciate so much you, Drew, and teeing this up for me to have a chance to talk to folks.
A pleasure, man. Thank you for being my muse, friend. This is fascinating stuff. And again, thanks for being part of our Innovator series. It's truly an innovation. Again, my guest today, Dr. Douglas Mackaman, Ph.D., founder, CEO of Sabatigo. You can visit sabatigo.com, and we'll link the site, Doug's LinkedIn profile, and all the other ways that you can follow Sabatigo here on the show in the notes. Special thanks and shout out, of course, to Dunn Brothers Coffee and to, Doug, am I saying this right? To Nina's Coffee, though it's serving the Dunn Brothers drink of the day, Nina's?
That's right, man. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And of course, to North Peak Brewing here in the great state of Michigan in the Dexter Traverse area. What can I say, Doug? It's just, there's not enough time to get all the brain juice out of you, but I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for taking the time.
I appreciate you too, Drew. Always love to connect, and it's been great to have this chance to talk to your listeners and your viewers. Thank you, man.
Thank you, man. We'll talk soon. Take care.